welcome to my channel. This video is 5 quick tips on how to take better wildflower photographs. A disclaimer, I'm not a professional photographer. These tips are mainly geared to the beginner with the hope that you won't make some of the mistakes that I made, and perhaps there'll be something that you haven't thought about. Okay, let's go. A good location. Now this may, depending on where you live, this may be quite challenging, but perhaps maybe not as challenging as you might think. So I came up to a field not far from home this morning. As you can see, it's a beautiful day, and we have a small field full of lupins. So while it's fantastic to get one of those locations where you have wall-to-wall wildflowers from horizon to horizon, and you can take these magnificent photographs, it doesn't always need to be that way. Somewhere local, somewhere that's got a patch of wildflowers, and I can give you a tip that'll actually make it look like there's a lot more wildflowers than perhaps there are. So this location for me is perfect. It's only 5 minutes away from home, and as you can see, in patches and some beautiful California woodland. And there's enough wildflowers here to make a pretty good shot, I think. Tip number 2, getting your camera nice and low to the ground. Now while this is mainly an aesthetic choice, you can see when I'm standing up here, the camera's about 4 feet off the ground. You can see the wildflowers look quite nice, but you can sort of see gaps in between them. But if you lower the perspective, the flowers become more pronounced. They are the star of the show after all. And it looks like the illusion is that there's actually more lupins than there actually are. So this particular shot I've framed with the 3 trees going off into the distance and the lupins covering the bases. I think it'll make for a nice shot. Tip number 3, how close can I get? Now if I'm too close to the front wildflower, no matter what I do, it's going to come out blurry. In this case I'm about 17 millimeters and f11. My hyperfocal distance on this front wildflower is about 3 feet, so I can get to it in about 1.5 feet. And everything from there through to the horizon should be in focus. If you like to open up the aperture and shoot it at 5.6 or less, then that can have a nice effect too, where the front flowers are in focus and the ones at the back are sort of blurred out. Either way, it can make a nice shot. Tip number 4, shooting at a nice fast shutter speed. So wildflowers have a tendency to move if there's the slightest breeze. Now I'm out here this morning and there's not a breath of wind, so shutter speed isn't going to be an issue. But if there was even the slightest breeze, I'd have to crank up the shutter speed. If that means increasing your ISO, then do it, because there's nothing worse than getting home and finding out that you've got everything right, but the wind was blowing and your flowers, especially the ones close to the camera, are going to be out of focus. This happened to me last year when I was at the Carrizo Plain. It was a super bloom in California, and the scenes were amazing, but I didn't take into account the fact that the wind was blowing and most of my shots ended up blurry. So in this case, as I mentioned, shutter speed is not an issue. I'm still shooting at 1/50th of a second, f10. But if there was the slightest breeze, which is actually just happening just now, then I might crank it up to 1/200th of a second and raise the ISO if I need to. Probably the most important thing. So the breeze picked up just a little bit, so I've increased my shutter speed to 1/320th of a second, and I've increased my ISO to 500. So I should get a nice sharp shot. And finally, tip number 5, check your work. Like I mentioned when I was at the Carrizo Plain, I didn't do that. I got home and most of my photographs were blurry because I mentioned it was windy. And if I'd known that, I might have been able to figure out that I needed to increase the shutter speeds. So check your work. It's easy to do on a camera such as this one. I can go into preview mode and then zoom in and look at the clarity of the flowers in the viewfinder. Make sure they're sharp. Go up to the horizon, take a look there, and make sure that the image is sharp throughout. Definitely worth taking the time to do that. And my final thoughts before I wrap this up is, when you're out in beautiful fields of wildflowers such as this, just be super aware of where you're putting your camera bag and where you're tramping, so other people can go to these lovely places and sit under oak trees and just enjoy these lovely scenes. Wildflowers are very fragile, and it doesn't take much for a field like this to get trampled. So that's it from me. I look forward to seeing you on another adventure real soon. Take care.